Hi, my name is Bruno Sade from brunosade.com. Today, I want to share some thoughts about grief and how we can use EFT to help us when we are dealing with grief. So, first of all, what is grief? Grief is the natural process that takes place as a reaction to loss. Now, this might be, we could be talking about the loss of a person, the loss of a pet, or the loss of something that was important to us. It could be something like a job, our youth, our health, our independence. It could be the loss of a dream or project that we realize we're not going to be able to accomplish or do in our lifetime. Basically, it can be the loss of anything that had some importance to us. So we could say that grief is both a universal and a personal process. It's universal in the sense that no human is exempt from ever experiencing grief. We are all going to experience it at some point in our lives. And it's personal because how each person process grief might vary according to each person's personal history, different losses they might have had in their past, the different resources they might have at their disposal, and also the nature of the loss itself and what the person or thing that was lost meant to them. That's going to play a major role in how hard or difficult the grieving process might be for any given person. Now, unfortunately, grief tends to involve some degree or a lot of emotional pain. As we learn to adapt and live our lives without that which we have lost, without the person or thing or situation that we have lost, usually we're going to experience some emotional pain when thinking about or remembering anything connected to that person or thing that we have lost, both the negative and the positive memory. So let's say, for example, that we are talking about the loss of a romantic relationship that didn't work out. Chances are at the beginning of the grieving process, we're going to notice that both the negative and the positive memories of the relationship are both probably going to hurt emotionally when we think about them. The negative memories because they were negative in the first place, but the positive memories, or what used to be happy or positive memories, are probably going to bring up some degree of emotional pain or unpleasant emotions because even though they were happy at the time, the contrast to the current situation, the current reality where we are no longer in that romantic relationship, that person, our ex-romantic partner, is no longer in our lives, that contrast is probably also going to bring up some degree of sorrow or any other emotion or emotional pain. Now, how long is the grief process going to take? There's no universal answer. It's going to vary according to each person. There's no set amount of time that's appropriate to grieve. That being said, sometimes the grieving process can get stuck or even not get started at all, especially in those cases when the person who is grieving perhaps has had many losses in their past that weren't fully processed or resolved, or perhaps at the time of their current loss, they had to deal with many things or take care of family members, relatives, etc. And therefore, they had to be strong for them and they couldn't allow themselves to begin the grieving process. And or what might also happen is for different reasons, when people try to deny or pretend the loss never happened or that it didn't affect them, that can also somewhat impair the grieving process. Now, once the grieving process starts, something to take into account is that grief tends to come in waves, meaning that we might feel like we are doing relatively okay for days or weeks or months. When I say relatively okay, I mean that we feel not so much emotional pain or not so much sorrow, or like we are kind of adjusting to the loss. But then perhaps there's a certain anniversary coming up or a certain date or something, or let's say we are on social media and Facebook shows like a reminder photograph of when we were in that relationship. And any of these can be like triggers of these waves of grief. And it's something that is normal. And what we can do with EFT is tap on the different memories or triggers about these waves, so that these waves with time, they become less painful, less intense, so to speak, less tsunami-like and overwhelming, perhaps a bit less frequent, or they won't last as long. So that the desired outcome when using EFT on grief is not that we will forget the person or the thing that we have lost, but that we will be able to remember them without as much emotional pain. And that in turn will allow us perhaps even to feel a higher degree of connection to that which we have lost, or to the different memories or experiences we shared with that person. So basically, one way to apply EFT is to notice in these waves of grief, is there any particular memory that you notice coming up, such as, let's say, using the example of the romantic relationship, that when I remember how we used to go on trips with my ex-romantic partner, and maybe there's one particular trip that was really great, and when I think about it now, it makes me feel sad. So I could tap on how it's making me feel now, that sadness, and the different aspects that are probably going to come to the forefront after each tapping round. This is called shifting aspects in EFT. When we tap on something and after one or two rounds, the mind is now focusing on something else that's connected. So it could be perhaps what used to be a happy memory that's now making me feel sad. Or maybe it's even, I might be remembering perhaps another trip or another memory that wasn't so happy to begin with. Maybe I'm remembering one of the arguments I had with my ex-romantic partner, and that's also making me feel sad or angry or ashamed, embarrassed, etc. And again, I can also tap on these memories, so that basically what we are trying to do is to diminish and release as much as possible the emotional pain connected to the different associations we have in our mind to the person or the thing or situation we have lost. And something to keep in mind is that if you want to work on this by yourself, but there's any one of these memories that you notice perhaps feels too emotionally intense or traumatic, maybe it was like a traumatic memory that feels a bit like too much to work on by yourself, please, in that case, I encourage you to enlist the aid of a certified EFT practitioner, such as myself or someone else, if you have that possibility, so that they can support you in the grieving process. And that's it for today. I hope this was useful, and I look forward to seeing you again in one of my next videos.